I'm honoured to have spent an hour this week in the company of David Harewood, renowned actor, writer, documentarian and director. And we began by chatting about the thing that's on everybody's lips, bloody lockdown. How's your lockdown going?
Creeping back into sort of, meetings, and it's been lovely and still and quiet, and I must admit I kind of enjoyed it early on, just having the peace to just sort of remember to be a dad and a husband, and I've just been so busy traveling and acting and doing meetings and stuff, so it was a real joy just to stop and I really enjoyed it. Now, I'm starting to get a bit restless, and suddenly finding that it's all flooding in. I've got a book deal I'm trying to negotiate, documentaries I'm trying to pit, so it's all exploding again. But
that's great.
Calm it all down, and just remember the last 8 weeks, how joyous the last 8 weeks have been personally.
It's interesting, isn't it, that it takes a global pandemic to give the self-employed permission to stop. I can't imagine any other circumstance in which hustlers such as myself and yourself would just go, oh no, all right, I'm going to stop packing at the coalface now and just take it easy.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're lucky. We're lucky that we're in that bracket that
we can survive
sort
it.
of sit back and I've been tweeting furiously about this the theatre shutdown, and just I can't imagine what that must be like if you're you work in front of a house, or you're in wardrobe, or you're a designer, or it just must be hell.
That's the thing when you tweet about theatre, or in my case I tweet about the loss of it. Today's news was that potentially 77% of comedy venues face closure. You tweet about that, and there's a certain, albeit small, sort of section of the population that will go, oh, you lefty lovies, and you're right, it's then you have to point out, oh, hang on, there's this ecosystem, and and there's electricians, and there's carpenters, and there's stage managers, but also theatre is, television is not particularly democratic, film less so, I imagine, but the theatre started, those spaces where as a young person you can come in and put on a show, they're almost like the last vestige of proper open it's artistic expression.
Absolutely. It's everything. It's culture. It's as you say, we it's only through performance like that and art, culture, that we understand who we are. And people, as you say, people think we're kind of lefty lovies. I did this. I had the same thing. I just got attacked. I said, I was starting to talk about theatre, and someone was like, there's people dying. It's not about you wanting to go to the theatre. And I'm like, it's not about me wanting to sit in a fucking theatre.
Yeah.
It is about the ecosystem around that. Of the painters, the electricians, the set builders, all these people who are now just out of work, and the idea that as a community, as an artistic community, comedians as well, music venues, culture itself, it's just stopped, and that's a scary world to live in if we can't comment on who we are, if it's just left to the politicians and commentators and fucking Twitterverse to sort of comment on who we are and what we are. We're truly lost.
No, I totally agree. It's a way of reflecting the times as well. And when somebody says to you, people are dying, they are. They really are. And it's absolutely disgraceful the way that has been managed, and then blame shifted upon the general population. But that doesn't mean even, having people dying and that terrible casualty rate does not preclude trying to save institutions, doesn't preclude trying to make sure that when all this is over, as I hope it will be, something beautiful remains that we can turn to give us solace.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And it is in such times we look to comedians, artists, dance and ballet culture to help us understand it. So and I'm just coming from a comprehensive school boy who who sort of, found theatre and was just literally blown out the park by it. I tweeted on Saturday how my first trip to the theatre was to see King Lear, and I didn't fucking know anything about Shakespeare, didn't know anything about, and somehow 5 of the worst kids got to go on the trip, and
were you one of the 5? I presume you were.
Of course,
proper delinquent. I'm hoping.
Fully intended to spend the evening fucking around. Fully intended to just hit the cider and just laugh my way through the entire evening. And at the end of the play, 5 of us, I can remember, just all trying to stop crying because Cordelia was dead, and silence on the coach on the way home, complete and utter silence, because it just blew us away. And for me,
that particularly drew you. I mean, you've talked about sort of Cordelia's death, but was there anything beyond that resonated, that connected the 5 of you, that made you think this isn't just a period piece that's disconnected from my own personal reality?
I think it was just sort of, it was kind of loss. It was sort of, the idea that this old man was, this foolish old man had just sort of entrusted these evil daughters to sort of with his kingdom, and sort of kind of just disregarded the one true person that loved him. I think it was just the sort of the tragedy of it all, and that he kind of, that he sort of, I mean, and I know this having had a breakdown, you sort of find truth in madness. Yes. And that, he was on the heath, naked, thinking, screaming at the, raging at the gods, and just stripping him bare from this, this great king had lost everything. And then that whole section of the play where he's, crazy, and he's one of these people wandering around on the tubes, but in that sort of broken down state, finds a peace that he probably hadn't had whole play. And that, I found that whole part of the play just so beautiful and it's my favorite. It remains my favorite Shakespeare play. And I just, as kids, we just kind of sat there and just gobsmacked by it. And as I say, I wasn't particularly bright at school, and I think I learned very late. I think going to drama school was probably the first time I took English language seriously.
But that's because you engaged by it. That's the thing. I mean, I don't think one can judge intelligence in any way, shape or form from performance at school. It's got to be, people learn in different ways, and I'm certainly one of those people. I'm fanatically interested when I'm interested, and if I'm not interested, I will fail every exam going. I can't add, and I mean, but I've come to things that I found difficult at school later in life. Now I'm very interested in science, and I love pure mathematics, and I love, but if you're taught poorly, I don't mean to impugn anyone, or you're just not at that right stage to appreciate it, then you just get lost, don't you? You just
completely. And I did a documentary about it's called "Will Britain Ever Have a Black Prime Minister?" which was on the BBC which was repeated, and we go right back to preschool and how just these young very 5-year-olds are being excluded from nurseries because their behaviour is different.
Yeah.
And so this young black woman sort of bought a nursery and just took all these kids in, and just because she teaches them differently, and it's not because, rather than having them conform to this one way of behaviour, which obviously if you're maybe you're if you're a middle class white lady, and this jumping up and down, bouncing off the walls, you might find that threatening. You might find that you can't quite cope with that. So they're constantly told that they're naughty. Even at that age, your behaviour is unacceptable.
But then it sticks.
This woman was doing exactly the opposite of that, and just sort of, talking to them and calming them down, and then just doing other playthings, getting them running around, getting them going, using their energy differently. Getting to learn differently, and it's as you say, it's people learn at different paces, different and at different times. And I'm just like you. didn't pay any attention. And now when I look at plays and I get fascinated by it. I just fall into whole new characters and I love it. I've had much more freedom on stage than I have on screen, particularly in England, to play sort of three-dimensional characters. I look back at my career, it's been pretty dull.
Stitch Fix is an online personal styling service for men and women where an expert stylist picks clothes just for you based on your taste, size and price preferences. Then they deliver your clothes straight to your door. Perfect when you want to discover something new and to avoid queues at the shops. How does it work? It's easy and fun, otherwise I wouldn't be telling you about it. I'm all about ease and fun. Fill out a style profile about your clothing preferences. For me, it was mainly blazer oriented, including how much you'd like to spend on their simple to use website. Then your stylist will hand select and send you 5 items of clothing and accessories in your preferred fit and style. You get to try them on at home and decide which items you want to keep and send back the rest with free returns. The charge of just £10 for your stylist time is redeemable against anything you decide to keep. Just go to stitchfix.co.uk/hour to try it out. It's been a great way for me to discover brands and styles I never would have picked for myself, with the bonus of not having to leave the privacy of my own home. Stitch Fix has over 100 men's and women's brands, including well-known names, emergent designers and their own exclusive in-house brands. You have the choice to set up regular deliveries or just order a one-off delivery for when it suits you best. Not only will your stylist select items that suit you, but they'll give you ideas on how to wear the items that are sent. So get started with Stitch Fix today and support this podcast by going to stitchfix.co.uk/hour right now. That's stitchfix.co.uk/hour. You were the first black actor to play Othello at the National, and that was 1997.
First real black actor, yeah.
Well, so I'm presuming they were still employing white actors in blackface upside. It is. I don't even have words for that. I don't have a framework for that.
But Sue, when I played it, there was a piece in the Independent that was saying, who is this? Who is this? Is political correctness gone mad? Who is this David Harewood? Never heard of him. Why is he being allowed to take this role? It should be Brian Cox.
Why is this brilliant black man playing a brilliant black man?
It just
get a white dude and get the shoe polish out, because that's really going to engage people.
But this is how far behind the curve we are. That nobody had blacked up in America since 1930s.
Well, it was Paul Robeson, wasn't it? Because Paul Robeson was made that role his own, and I don't know
Completely.
what it was about the cultural differences between America at that point and the UK that made us not be able to follow suit. I mean, I remember even as a child seeing a picture of Laurence Olivier and Orson Welles and finding it profoundly strange. I couldn't contextualise it within a sort of racist context, but it was just like, what is that man doing?
I mean, I've heard from those who saw it that it was extraordinary. And I have seen the film with Frank Finlay, and technically, I mean, knowing what his vocal instrument, technically, it's magnificent as a vocal performance. It's magnificent, but it looks ridiculous. He's walking like this and walking around like this as the, and sort of, I don't know. I mean, but I grew up watching the black and white minstrel show, and I'm actually now about to, if we sign off on it, to do a documentary on blackface, which is looking at because whenever we talk about it on Twitter, people just go, "Oh, you're just being soft," or you're just being a lefty, and there's nothing wrong with it, and and then you think, well, let's look at the history of it. Let's look at the roots of it, and the roots were firmly in depictions of black people as sort of lazy, good-for-nothing simpletons with the red lips and just going, oh! And then I've even further realised that it was the only way you could perform as a black artist in America was to black up and play the banjo. And so that was so scores of blues artists and soul artists back in the day had to black up themselves. Not just white people, black people had to black up.
So they had to make themselves dark in order to conform to a sort of African stereotype.
Yeah, the only way that they could perform as black artists was to put the makeup on and become acceptable, because we like that. We like you playing the banjo and singing, but if you were just
good at that,
because you're good at that, and because it was an acceptable art form. I mean, as I say, I remember Saturday night viewing. It was Saturday night viewing in the 70s.
Yeah,
chorus lines of blackface, and I remember you sitting there watching it thinking, what the fuck is this? Just as a kid, just not being able to get my head around it.
And also what always I found painful, and again it was without having the context or the intelligence or the experience maybe to put it into words, but now what's his name? Lovely Kenny
Lynch.
Black comic. Kenny Lynch.
Kenny Lynch.
It looked like he'd been held prisoner. It literally looked like he was sat on a stool with a load of, sort of big name white comics, and he was trapped in this persona that he couldn't escape from, because the persona was the thing that allowed him to be loved by the public, to become this sort of conflation of stereotypes. That was his golden ticket into the world of show business. But to have to inhabit that must have been so corrosive. And I think that way also when I look at certain kind of camp comics, that they couldn't perhaps express lots of other sort of parts of their prismatic sexual identity. They were just tunneled into this notion of sort of high camp, and sort of, because that way they were palatable,
I guess Paul O'Grady started like that, didn't it, in a way, but then he sort of became, in a sense, he started to maybe dress a little bit more, just inhabit himself a little bit more. Is that?
I think as well, Lily Savage allowed him. I think Paul O'Grady's a proper genius. I think Lily allowed him to sort of play with this. Lily was so angry, and I loved that. It was a sort of rebuttal to all that nice, safe Larry Grayson stuff that we all grew up with, And I was madly in love with Larry Grayson. I thought he was absolutely magnificent. But there's a savagery to Lily, hence the name, I guess, that just seemed like a big two fingers. But then I don't know. I've never interviewed Kenny, but perhaps he'd sit here and say, no, was completely comfortable, and I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it?
He was a footballer. I think he was actually a very talented footballer.
Was he?
Yeah, and I think he played for Spurs or something like that, and sort of found his way from football into comics. So I think it was quite an opportunity for him. But I mean, as a kid, when there's that show, The Comedians, which Les Dawson and all that. I mean, he would have been on stage. I think maybe he was a little bit before, but he would have. I mean, Jim Davidson would have been doing chalky stuff. I think
Jim Davidson still is doing chalky stuff.
Yeah,
in some parallel universe, I don't know.
And he's bitter that people no longer find it funny. He's angry. And I guess. If we're being true artists, it is a very fine line of what is offensive and what is comedic. I mean, Lenny Bruce was always, it was all about just fucking offend and be free. But I think it is such a fine line, and when you're not going to get Roy Chubby Brown at the kids, he's not going to be getting any kids parties and stuff. If there's an audience for that, maybe let him do it. But I guess he's got to accept that he's not going to be more mainstream. I don't know. Should we ban him completely? It's weird. It's very, very strange.
Well, it gets into sort of cancel culture, which is very sort of has a sort of very high vibrational value, doesn't it, at the moment? But and it gets into what out of one's history do you remember and why? What do you allow to survive? Because either it has an audience or because it almost provides a warning. I don't know. And I think we are only just starting to navigate that.
Yeah, it's very scary, and having being in a sort of popular DC TV show with rabid young fans, many of whom are LGBTQ, And the minute you say the wrong thing, or the minute they presume you say the wrong thing, you can just be attacked remorselessly for days. And it's quite uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable place to be. And there's all these things of ships, the shipping, where they ship two characters. They want these two, like, I'm wearing Supergirl, and Supergirl isn't a lesbian, but somehow in their minds she should be. So they've invented this sort of relationship with this other very popular character in the show. And I directed an episode where Supergirl sort of, they keep writing love interests for her. So a handsome boy comes into the show, and he's suddenly her love interest. And they bombarded my IMDb site with just 0 ratings for my episode, and just attacked me remorselessly for days. And it was just really uncomfortable. And every time you try and it's the worst thing to try and, nowadays I just mute, block, and I don't get out. But if you start getting into answering these people, it's just exhausting. And arguing with people on Twitter is just a complete and utter waste of time and energy. Again, it's that thing of, the reason I suspect that clamour's happening is because representation is still not there, so they want to see more gay characters. They want to see their own young lives being represented. The challenge comes when you, as the director, are saying, yes, but that's not Supergirl's trajectory. It's okay that Supergirl's straight, whilst acknowledging that it would be great in another universe if DC and Marvel put more LGBTQ plus kind of characters in. I think that's a very valid statement, and I think it does, that world where men are impossibly hench and women are have impossibly big tits and leather. And I love all. I know they're great escapist movies, but to unpick that a little bit and to put, the way that Black Panther did. Black Panther sort of looks. The best thing that I think about Black Panther is it made so much money, because it just shows you that it's all out. I'd be very down with, an entirely gay sort of Marvel Universe spin-off, and then everyone's happy, It's just... where Thor's got some incredibly sort of beautiful sort of younger brother, or even not beautiful, who just falls madly in love with some dude who sort of happens to be working in a nearby office. It doesn't matter. I haven't fully fleshed out that script. Don't judge me. Hopefully we'll get to that, right? I hope so. Why not? And I do feel as though the industry is wrestling with it. Obviously it's still majority owned by the same old crusty set, but I do feel as though there's room for more stories. I just again watched Moonlight the other day, and I was watching this there thinking, they must have been going, this is just not going to work. This is just not going. Black homosexual gangsters. It's just not going to work. But then you watch it and it's beautiful, and you just think, well, why shouldn't it work? And I do think there's room for those stories. And likewise in Supergirl, we have the first transgender superhero, and she's gorgeous. She's gorgeous, and she started her treatment, way before puberty, but she's just beautiful. And you kind of think, and yet you still get idiots kind of go, you're not real, and you're just a bloke. And it's kind of mind blowing how people just don't sort of accept it and kind of go with it and celebrate it. But it's mind blowing that people, I guess, of course, because the world is changing. But the thing is, the world has changed quicker than the representation of the world. That's what I don't understand. When people look at the simulacrum, when they look at the television and film industry, they don't realise that their own lives are already beyond that. We're already living in a thriving multicultural. In thriving multicultural communities where there are plenty of gay people and where there are trans kids that need our support. So the fact that, occasionally that's shown on television, it shouldn't be shocking. It should be, where have you been? We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for the mirror to the crazy, complex, interesting life that we are all living. So I don't get it, and I tend to sort of, like you, sort of block it out. But, they've not realised that they have all the power, and it's vested in this very simple handheld device called a remote control. And if they don't like it, just fucking change channels. turn over, for fuck's sake. I'm completely with you. You just, don't watch it. And at the same time, I also then think, because this is the longest I've been in England for 7 years. Lockdown has been the longest I've been here for any length of time, for about 7 years. And I turn the TV on, and I'm still just, I kind of think, it's still the same old formula. And, just this morning, Batwoman has been announced. The new Batwoman. Ruby Rose was Batwoman, and she hated it, and so she's left. And they've just cast a black woman as the first ever black person to ever play Batwoman, and she's also LGBTQ. So it's like you just think, fucking great. They had a black president before there was a black president. Most of their networks have got multiple shows with black female leads, and you come back to England and it's still like watching the same types of shows. Thank goodness for Michaela Cole. Yeah. Because who just explodes that whole myth that we're all, I don't know, that what they're expecting from us. But I just think, as you were saying earlier on, the audience has already evolved beyond what the broadcasters, where the broadcasters think they are. And I just think that the broadcasters need to be braver with their choices. And why hasn't there been a black Sherlock? Why hasn't there been a black Holmes? In America, again, there's Holmes is an Asian woman. We need to. It constantly shocks me that these were so in the grip of tradition in England that we're afraid to take those steps that we'll need to take in order to bring the audience through that argy-bargy complaining to the BBC phase, so where they just either turn it over or watch something else, or they accept it, which is where I think they are in America. I think they're definitely there in America, even though there's still pushback there. But
maybe there's the plurality of channels in America. Maybe that's the thing. There's so much content. There's not the forensic kind of focus on it that there seems to be. And of course, the BBC comes now with huge political baggage. It's become the football of the right and the left. And so anything that breaks through is subject to so much additional scrutiny, I think. And what I loved about Michaela Cole's show, apart from the fact that it's all amazing, is that the character, what really moved it for me, apart from the fact that obviously it's just featured a lot of just sassy, amazing, up-and-coming kind of BAME actors, is the moral ambiguity of them all. And that's what was so refreshing, because there's a tendency, I think, in the way dramas are rolled out, with notable exceptions, where there's good and evil and maybe only slight grey shading. But in the Michaela Cole universe, there's the good and evil just smashed to pieces. They exist.
Absolutely.
Everyone is a victim. Everyone is a victim of circumstance, of race, of class, of the conflation of both of those things. Yeah. Everyone's trying to survive, and with a sort of chokehold of sort of modern living and capitalism and history, and it's just. And she'd probably listen to me gassing on and go, no, I didn't really intend that at all. What a load of old post-rationalised bullshit. And I'd laugh, and she'd probably be like, that as a viewer is what's like amazing. I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to like, but I'm just obsessed with that world because it feels real.
And complicated, as you said. And, I know fully what you mean, because I came out in the generation where we were all honourable. I was a good black Joe. I was, the good black man character. I was always, I spent the first 10 years being the honourable black man.
You were very exactly that. Yes, you were very trustworthy.
Trustworthy, good, dependable Joe. And I fucking hated it. It was so boring and dull. And I said I could go on stage and be much more edgy and look for the darker parts of my nature. But on screen, it's been sadly. I could look back on my career in England, and I start crossing them off now. When people send out my CV, I'd say, don't just cross that off. It's just unimportant, because I needed to pay the rent, or I needed to pay the mortgage, and there was nothing else around. But in terms of really challenging work, there's been very little on screen. I could really count it all on one hand.
This This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Best Fiends. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends is a mobile puzzle game perfect for social distancing. You play it right on your phone and it's designed for anyone. You don't need to be a serious gamer to enjoy it. You progress through different levels, solving challenging puzzles that actually engage your brain in a fun way that everyone can enjoy. I won't lie, I've been playing almost solidly for the last couple of weeks and I've made it way past level 70. Not easy, but it's visually stimulating with bright colours and cute characters which you collect as you progress through the levels. Best Fiends updates monthly with new levels and events so it never gets old or tired. Whether you're on a break at work or have 5 minutes to spare at home, Best Fiends is a great way to keep that brain active. And once you've downloaded the game, you don't need to be connected to the internet to play it. With over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated puzzle game is brilliant fun. And download it for free right now. To do so, just go to the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. Wasn't it interesting that when it came to film and TV in this country, you were the dependable archetype, but you returned to plays written in the 16th and early part of the 17th century, which give you the more ambivalence and character complexity that you've looked for. You know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? That he got it.
That's the test of, and again, that's the again, as a comprehensive schoolboy, is realizing these classics that are just that sort of, as you say, were written like hundreds of years ago, but still speak to the kind of human condition. And I really enjoyed kind of, even now if I get somebody gives me a Shakespeare bit and I'll go and look at the Shakespeare Made Easy. I have to go and look at that bit and go, oh, I see, that's what they're talking about. I'm not some sort of boffin who understands the kind of intellectual gymnastics that Shakespeare's. Once I know what's happening, I completely key into it and it comes alive for me. Simon Sharma, doing a thing with Simon Sharma last night, and wonderful to hear him talk about Shakespeare from such an intellectual perspective. I didn't understand half the stuff he was talking about, but it's wonderful to see somebody bring it to life like that, and it makes me as a sort of working class boy kind of go, I want to get up on stage and play Hamlet, or I want to get up and do, as long as someone explains it to me, I want to jump up and do it because it's rich, and as a black actor, it's just been so rare to find that complexity as an actor. It's just so rare, and I guess that's why I miss the theatre and I'm desperate to get back to it.
But you're the lightness. It's so interesting because Shakespeare has been kept as the sort of preserve of intellectuals. And I remember when I did, I was always hugely interested in English literature, and because I enjoyed it, I worked at it and got lucky with exams because I have a photographic memory. And all that was required was to memorise speeches. I memorised all 5, I think there are, Hamlet's soliloquies. Nobody ever taught me or showed me what they meant. I could recite them, but probably now, but I couldn't. It took going to a theatre. It takes, for all your intellectualising or memorising or quoting, contextualising, you need an actor who's the lightning rod, who takes the elements of, stuff that people are scared of, like iambic pentameter. It's all bullshit, blah, blah, blah. It's just de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de, whatever.
Yeah.
Take that and make me understand it, make me feel it, more importantly. And make me feel that a character, whether it's Coriolanus or whether it's Titus Andronicus or Lear, make me feel that I identify with them and that they are subject to the same whimsical, boring, painful shit that I am. And that's what's incredible about what you do, is that you can take the sort of dry learnings, which I have, but make them intelligible. No wonder you love it. That's fucking alchemy, man.
It is. I mean, again, I think it was Olivier who said, it's humanity made art. But it's only like acting and dance that can kind of realize emotion like that. And there's nothing like sitting in the theatre and sort of knowing that, when playing Othello was great. A great example of it was just seeing people just sitting there like this, knowing what's going to happen, and being genuinely moved by what's happening on stage, and there's no feeling like it. I movie acting doesn't really come close, but something still very primal about everyone sitting in the same room, kind of watching a story being told.
But as you say, I think that the fact that everyone knows how these stories end now makes it even more profound. In the same way, some of the funniest jokes are the ones where, if you're sitting in the audience, you know the punchline, you know it's coming, and it builds this collective sense of excitement about it. And a really good comic will tell the punchline you're expecting and then twist it a bit. But it's taking Lear as the example, you know how it rolls, but it's that Greek tragedy thing of, it's the time ticking down, it's the painful waiting for the not just desserts, it's and as you say, the stripping down, taking away the power and the potency and the crown and all those things. That's just a bloke who made a series of bad decisions and backed the wrong horses, and who's been taken advantage of, an old man laid vulnerable by time, predated upon by youth, money grabbing youth. Oh, it's awful. Now I'm getting emotional. What I really respect about what you do though is like the punchlines. I'm really bad at that. So if I tell a joke, I will sort of I will kind of get. I know the punchline is the funny bit, but I always fuck up the punchline because I know it's at the timing for bum to bum, bang. I miss. There's something very unique about that, about delivering a whole story and then going bang. That's the punchline. I'm thinking about the punchline and then I just get so confused. That wonderful space between the last line and the laugh. I always trip up over that because I know it's the setup. But maybe it's the setup. That's what it is. But I think it's always the same. I'm no great deliverer of punchlines, but I think it's that same thing about surfing the communal energy of the audience. I think it's that, isn't it? And it's possibly my need is to hear people laughing for whatever reason, and your need is the absolute pin drop silence. You must feel we probably get our kicks. That our kick level is the same, but we just require a different kind of noise or absence of noise. For you, it's the focus of no one's eating crisps, popcorn, no one's fiddling in their bag, no one's phones are on. They are all just looking at you because they're so absorbed in the performance. Really what I want is almost the opposite of, I want rowdiness and noise and people nudging each other and what a twat, or But the great thing about comedy, which I think is that if you make well for me, because I don't write jokes brilliantly, but I like improvising, it's almost better if the joke goes badly wrong, because then you've got 10 minutes of just explaining, apologising, contextualising and riffing. Whereas for you, if you don't hit one of the big, if you muff a big soliloquy, you are destroyed. It's like, because they could be writing it along. I don't remember the quiz just busts out into whatever.
So not to be or to be, you're done. You're done.
Yes. You're cooked at that. You're at that point. I go back. I'm really struck by this image of you on the coach on the way home. As you say, traditionally you'd be off your tits on sort of cider and black and be sort of, showing your arse out the rear of the coach, which was always for me the great joy. I remember.
You know me so well, Sue.
No, I've been. I remember a particularly fond jaunt to the Roman Museum in Colchester, which ended with the whole of us getting so dressed down because we'd all just park the old arses at the back of the coach and cause a sort of pile up around St Albans or wherever it was. But to have a feeling, and I've had lots of those in the theatre, but to have a feeling and then to make it a job is a thing that you've just glossed over a bit there, because as you say, you came from first generation sort of West Indian kind of immigrant family where there was, I presume, perhaps wrongly, no real culture of being able to afford or get access to the theatre.
No,
so you
never went to the theatre.
You go home that night and go, Mum, Dad, I've found what I'm going to do. Is that what happened? Was it like a proper damn?
Sort of, yeah. I didn't go home that night. I mean, it just hit. I was just really over. That was the night I sort of thought about the power of theatre in the building. I mean, I'm not going to get too sort of romantic, because a couple of weeks later we went to see Richard II and we just fucking hated it, and we did fuck around a lot. So
that makes the story even better then. There you go. There's the punchline. You've done it.
Just had no idea what was going on, and we just started to fuck around. But I was always, I was the classroom clown. I was always messing around, and I was, wasn't the most handsome kid, so the way that I got attention was just to be funny. And as I say, I loved a comedy, and I loved Tommy Cooper and just the chaos of Tommy Cooper, and not a single joke, but just tricks that going wrong, and Les Dawson playing the piano badly, and just classic things like people making that kind of comedy, and situational comedy, and Monty Python, bizarre stuff, and just fucking really. So I always thought I might be a comedian, and then.
But you've just told me that you find punchlines difficult, so I've really enjoyed that.
It probably wouldn't have been a good idea, to be honest with you. But I sort of I was at school, and we came to leaving school, and you're doing the same, going to this careers library and sitting in the careers library and looking at blokes with Bunsen burners and blokes in white coats and lab coats, and looking at cars, and none of it was making any sense. And my mates were going into auto engineering, and none of it was speaking to me. And I was literally 2 weeks away from school, and I'd always been with you, I love improvising. So whenever there was a class play, I'd sort of get people up to do bits and pieces, and then I'll just say, and then I'll just do 20 minutes or something, and everybody went, yeah, great, Dave. And so I always kind of knew that I just found it so easy. And then my teacher called me. I was at home, and my teacher rang up and asked me to come into the school, and I thought I'd been naughty, so I thought I'd better go. So I went up, and it was my English teacher and my drama teacher. And my English teacher, Mr. Reader, just started talking, and then he said, well, what are you going to do when you leave? And I said, I don't know. I said, I haven't got a clue. I really don't know. He said, well, look, we've been talking in the staff room, and we think you should be an actor. And fucking like a eureka moment.
Wow.
So it was just like, of course. It was like a light bulb went on in my head. And I didn't even know it was possible to do that. Again, and I realized this later in my life, that I've never had any value. I don't know whether it's about, again, tied into race and Britain, but I found my value very late in life. Going to the Golden Globes and being on those red carpets in Homeland, and I suddenly got a value. People were asking me questions and talking about my performance, and that was the first time I ever felt I had any value. Up until then, it's been a hole in my heart, a real hole in me. And I never believed in it. So as a kid, I just didn't believe any of that was even possible. I think there has been times in my life when it was my teacher that said, you should be an actor. And then I went to the National Theatre, and they said, you're a good actor. And then I thought about that, and then I went back to the National Theatre, and they said, you should go to drama school. And then I auditioned, and I get into RADA, and they go, you're good. So it's all this time of me going, oh, really? Oh. I envy these actors who say, yes, I wanted to be an actor when I was 5, and I yearned for the stage, and my mother and father had books on the shelf, and I talked about Hamlet, and I knew none of that. But for me, it was just, I sort of stumbled into it, and then I just kept working, and then it became an issue of sort of paying them rent, and now suddenly, then when I was a father, a whole new fucking situation where I had to make some money, put some food on the table, and went through a whole period of playing just shit stuff just because I just needed the money, and it was only the weekend before I left for Homeland and for America, I had 80 quid left in the bank suit. I was done.
Before Homeland?
My career was done.
Oh.
I remember sitting in bed looking up at the ceiling thinking, I'm done. And then it had passed over to me, and Adrian Lester was suddenly Flavor, and people were talking about David Oyelowo, and I was old hat. I was old. I was done. So I thought to myself, should I go work at the post office? Should I go drive a bus? I really thought I needed, because I knew I needed to make some money. And when Homeland came in and I got it, it was just a miracle. So I got to America, and I've never stopped working since. And now I'm directing TV in America, and they love me, and they respect me, and they talk to me like I'm a fucking great thespian actor, and they respect my theatrical trade, and they respect my Englishness, and as they do. But I'm treated with a real deference, and I come back here, and I'm so pleased that you asked me to speak. You asked to speak to me, because when I'm here, by day I feel my value dropping.
That's awful.
Because this is your home. I turn my TV on. I don't see myself anywhere. You start this Black Lives Matter conversation, and people just shout at you and deny. Fucking Lawrence Fox says, "Oh, it's a tolerant, lovely, open country," and you go, "Are you nuts?" It's like, do you know what I've had to fight against all my life, and being chased by skinheads, and people just have no idea of the life that we've lived. I almost explain it like being a burglar walking up in white people's houses. I feel like I've been in all your houses, looked at all your photographs, eaten all your food, I know where you sleep. And yet they know nothing about us. Nothing. We're regarded as these sort of tolerated dark strangers, and I feel my value dropping by the day, and it's only things like this where I go, oh, Sue Perkins wants to speak to me. Oh, that's great, and I kind of I get a little pickup, and then that goes away, and I mean, it's starting to happen now because my documentary hit so big, and it's now BAFTA nominated, and I'm because of the documentary stuff, that's given me a whole new angle, and I love that, and I'm now seen as more of a not more of a presenter, but as a presenter, and that's great, because just to be an actor here, to be a black actor here, that's why they're all gone. There's nothing here, and I turn my TV on, and I still don't see those three-dimensional characters, black characters. I'm beginning to see that. There's that lovely guy in Sex Education I think he's up for a BAFTA as well. Wonderful actor. And, Michaela as well. Wonderful. John Boyega doing really, really well. Daniel Kaluuya, this younger generation doing really well. But they're all heading off to America because we still somehow haven't... It's still impossible to make your name and build a career as a black actor in this country. Still impossible.
But see, that
you just have to leave.
It just fills me with real sadness, but I suppose also, and what saddens me is the idea that, well, lots of things, but for a start, as you say, there's only one prominent black actor almost allowed. Certainly when you were in the period you're talking about, where there was Adrian came along or David came along, okay, I'm going to get usurped. And that's a terrible thing to feel. It's a terrible thing to feel that you can only work, because of the climate you're in, that you can only work at the expense of other people, and they can only succeed at your expense. Also, I guess I pick up on the fact that something that's pretty familiar to me, which is we tend to peg our sense of self-worth to the job we do and to the degree of sunlight that falls on our face at any time. And the third thing, I suppose, that strikes me is, you are smart as hell, right about it. Only you have that. I hear about the experience of being chased by skinheads in almost the same anecdotal fashion as you've delivered it. It's a sentence, it's something that's thrown away, and that immediately alerts me to the fact it's traumatic, because you're trying to just get it over it. You're trying to get the relaying of that information as quickly as possible, done, dusted. But I want to see it, I want to see really, that experience on screen. I want to see what it's like being a prisoner whether it's in a council block or not. I mean, I suppose it's most obvious in a council block, because you're in a flat and you're surrounded by people and you can't get away in those thin corridors where you can be trapped and beaten and handed and abused. And I just think, in order to move on, we kind of need to make our peace with the fact that that's how black kids grew up. In majority of, and you grew up in on the outskirts of Birmingham, a big town, and that's your experience. And then you imagine it's obviously still going on now, but then I think about the more rural outposts where it's, oh god, it doesn't sort of bear thinking about. Anyway, these are my thoughts coming out of what you've just said, which is a lot to unpick, but And it just makes me sad because I want you to have value, but also I think that lack of value could perhaps find an artistic expression which would educate, inform, and entertain us. I don't mean entertain us at your expense, but
No,
there could be gags in there.
It's funny you should say that, but I was asked to write, after the documentary, I was asked to write an audio book, and I was so traumatized by that documentary that I couldn't really get the words out for at least 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I started to write, and fair enough, he wrote back to me, the publisher wrote back to me and said, I'll be honest with you, this is a book. This is not an audio. This is not a 12,000 word audio book.
Yeah.
You need to write a book. And so then I started to write a book, and I've just had 5 of the biggest publishers all morning. I've just been fielding. The last couple of days has been really interesting because I have submitted 2 chapters, and there's been a bit of a frenzy.
I like that. You see,
which is exciting.
It's
exciting. Yeah, exactly.
But it's
But
interesting.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that there is a man. I'm like, really? But they're going, this is great, it's unique, and it's because I have no value. I feel there's no value in my story, in my just this black kid, and yet, I guess because of the times that we're in and Black Lives Matter, I guess, and because of the documentary, I guess that there's a need to hear it, I guess.
Well, then dramatise it, write the book and then dramatise it, or get someone to dramatise it for you. Because for me, it seems like, whenever one has a breakdown, that's it. It just means you've come to the end of your sprint. You've tried to run away, as we all do, from situations through space and time, and the breakdown occurs not because something's happened in that moment, but because our capacity to run away from whenever it was has now elapsed. And everything comes in, everything crowds in, all the panic and the anxiety, and in your case, voices, and a more manic, psychotic side. And I think all those things that you talk about in the documentary are important to see in every way, not only in a book but also in a dramatisation because it's about expectation. It's about all the things that are placed on you as a first-generation immigrant. It's about thrusting and changing the narrative of your family whilst also holding the surname given to you by, a slave trader way back. It's all, and it's about trying to be yourself while carrying the weight of history, and it's everything. I mean, I'm immediately excited and want to watch this, so you better get around to doing it. But as well as, of course, being a contextual piece about race and growing up in the 1970s, I just think and that's why the documentary was so great, because anybody who's prepared to open themselves up to that degree of scrutiny about a painful event it draws you completely into that, and it makes you be more honest about things yourself.
I must admit, though, I didn't expect it to be that difficult. I had completely forgotten half of that stuff, which is why, the morning I walked into that hospital with my mates and they told me about, that was the day I really had a major panic attack, because I suddenly remembered how ill I was and how confused I was. And up until that point, I think I remembered some of the mania, which was some of the fun bits. So when I pitched the documentary, I thought this is going to be fun, because I know I did some really wacky things, walking around town, singing to strangers, and I got up in the middle of the night for some reason and took our stash of hash. We had this big block of hashish, and I thought, I'm going to go and bury this outside Buckingham Palace. And I went, I don't know why I did this, but I walked to Buckingham Palace and I buried it in the pavement outside the palace. And then I started moonwalking, and all police cars screamed up and what's going on? And I just thought I had the perfect excuse. So I just kept saying, well, I'm an actor. I was doing a bit of research, gave them my name, and they checked it out. David Harewood, RADA, was an actor. Oh, right, okay. And they couldn't do anything. They just I'm just doing a bit of research. So they were like, oh, okay, well, just let us know you're in the area, fine, no problem, officer, but bye. And I thought, I can do anything. That's why I was so, because I was sort of trapped in this. I was determined to break out of this box that they'd put me in, a black actor. That's all you can do is do that. Yeah. And part of the mental breakdown was me trying to just say I can do anything. So this was just another sort of more proof to me that I can do whatever the fuck I want. And then I got walked up. Suddenly, I'm at home and my mate's waking me up and going, "Where's the hash? Where's the hash?" And I went, "Fuck." I buried it outside Buckingham Palace. He went, "What?" I said, "Yeah." So we jumped in the car, drove up to Buckingham Palace, and there it was, still in the fucking in the pavement. It's so both of us were just creasing up with laughter. I don't know why I did that,
but there is that sort of feeling of being superhuman before the crash.
Yeah.
That feeling, I really identified with that feeling. You talk about the smashed watch at the beginning of the documentary, and you sort of say, I believed by smashing the watch that I could control sort of the flow of time.
Yeah.
And there's exciting. Yeah, because that's at the point you're just carefree. Because you know that subconsciously you must know the crash is coming. So you just go, well, it's coming, it's an inevitability now, so I'm just going to be magnificent. And I'm just going to absolutely go to the edge of whatever my capacity is. So I really identified the idea of just being up all night and there's something coming up and you just feeling that you have to just be excited for everyone that they've got a new day on their hands. And of course, I can see then they're just going, nutter. But because of your perspective, you're glorious, you're the sun god.
Yeah. It was very, very, very exciting. And I mean, not that I did feel there was a crash coming, because I didn't. I just had this, because I didn't know what was happening to me. But it's like you talk about maths. I remember waking up one morning and everything seemed to be like a mathematical equation. Every angle, every shape was perfect. And I was just looking around there and going, look at that. Everything was amazing. And I'll never forget that morning. It was just like the most, everything was speaking to me. And I started cutting little bits of newspaper out. Anything that made sense, that pink top or that red pen, and I'd stick it on my various parts of my body, and then I'd just go for a walk. And I remember this one guy going, this is, he was a French guy going, I like this. This is, you are talking to me. I like it. And again, that was more confirmation that what I was doing was working. So it was sort of working on a conceptual, artistic kind of level. And then I had this little green man, little figurine of a green man. And when my mates were taking me to the doctors to see if I was crazy or not, I'd literally leave it on the desk. I'd leave it on the desk, and I'd go, if you think conceptually there's a little green man in this room, if you look for him, you can find him. And of course they'd say, there isn't a little green man in this room. I'd say, well, there is if you look for it. And then we'd spend the next hour just arguing about the concept of what is real and what is not real. And I'd say, if you're telling me I'm mad, but I can see a little green man, then I truly am mad. But I am not mad because I can see a little. I mean, it was nonsense. But when I pointed it out, they'd go, "Oh, that one, but that doesn't mean anything." I say, "But it is a little green man, though, isn't it?" It was funny, but it was also scary because I was out of control, but there's something thrilling about. There was something thrilling about it as well. Before I crashed, there was something thrilling about it.
But there's a sort of thread there, because there's something about, for all that it's just the worst outcome, to have a breakdown, to end up in a mental health facility. There's something in those places where you are, even though it's a terrible experience, you are given permission to be out of your mind.
Yeah. And
to understand that things are not right. Whereas before, you're not sure where the boundaries are. It's that moment of thinking, well, this isn't... Okay, I am. You've allowed me now to accept this is where I'm at. In the same way that you're allowed as a child to be an actor. You're being granted permission to do things. And I guess maybe your journey, and maybe mine too, is we have to find permission within ourselves. We have to give ourselves the agency to go, yeah, I'm okay. It doesn't even need to be more than that. I mean, certainly, I think even for me to get to the stage where I'm going, no, I'm all right. I mean, that seems like a almost Herculean task, and also it's a way of being noticed, isn't it? That, and I certainly don't mean to imply that breakdowns are sort of attention seeking, but it's a very powerful space to be in, isn't it? To be in that much need that you no longer can control your own mind.
Completely. And I wrote about how I got out because I had 2 breakdowns, and the second time I was more conscious. I wasn't very conscious the first time, so there's just days and days I just don't remember anything. The second time was I was conscious. I knew I was on a locked ward, and it was about trying to behave normally. And I write this whole thing in my book about, honestly, my brain was just like it was in a bag of oil. It was just like I was just so slow, and just looking around and looking at everybody and trying to work out what everybody was doing. But I'm sure I don't know whether you did this. I love to people watch, and I found that even in there I was people watching. Even in there I was just going. I thought, this is fucking fascinating. There was a guy who was sort of measuring random spaces on the floor with a little measuring, like a little bit of tape, measuring tape. He'd measure the distance from the stain to the wall, and then he'd get up and he'd go, and he'd measure this bit, and I found it absolutely mesmerizing. So I just pulled up my chair and I just watched him, and I'd fall asleep, and then I'd wake up and he'd be in another part, and I'd go and get my chair and I'd sit and I'd watch him again. And even though I sort of knew that, and I just wasn't getting out. I knew I wasn't getting out, but I knew I sort of had to really, at one point I did have to say to myself, I've got to start thinking about how I'm going to get out of here, because I know I've got a career outside. I know I'm not really supposed to be in here. So I sort of started to pull my shit together and just do all these sort of normal things. Just trying to do as many normal things as I can. Brushing my teeth was normal. So I thought, right, that shows that I'm normal. So every morning I'd get up, even though it would take me like 3 hours, because these drugs, just like that. So I would get out of bed, find my toothbrush, put the toothbrush on the paste on the brush, and then go to the sink and then brush my eyebrow, and then the brush would be going over here, and I'd go, finally my mouth, and I'd brush my teeth. Just to kind of demonstrate that I was normal, and that was a successful way of getting out, because I sort of, the more I tried to do normal things, the more they went, he's getting better.
But it's interesting that there was a performative element. You were
completely
playing the role of a sane person
completely
in order to get out of the Of course.
Even then, out of that, I knew that my mother, who's wonderful, was just watching me like a hawk. So she was convinced Shakespeare had sent me nuts. So and she didn't really want me to go back to London and become an actor, because she was just convinced it was just all stuff that undermined my sanity. So I knew she was watching me every day. And I would sit there knowing that she's looking at me, but just looking at the TV and kind of going, just like Richard and Judy, look what we're doing now. Just everything, knowing that I was still sort of spinning. It was performance. It was sort of, I paid a price for it because I thought I was better when I wasn't, and that's when I sort of had another relapse. But it was an incredible period for me. And I'm only now able to read my medical notes. They're quite upsetting. Some of the things I said was.
I was very, very moved when they had written down in your medical notes that you'd come in distressed and you kept repeating, I need to save the boy, and that you'd very acutely picked up on the fact that you were probably talking about yourself.
She did, the therapist did, yeah. And it really, God, it was painful. It was painful.
Yes, because you've created again split, not split personalities in a kind of psychiatric sense, but you've externalized your childhood self, and you want to change it or rework it, as we all do. We all want to sort of take things from the past and refashion them, and in the hope they will make us better human beings in the now. But it was, again, the openness of it, and it is, seeing the medication, just a list of the medication. I just found it, really, you've been chemically koshed, essentially. Because
Completely.
instead of listened to, quietened when you needed to perhaps have had the freedom of expression. And maybe now it's easy to talk about because, normal, inverted commas, behaviour is less sort of present. We acknowledge that there's a lot of behaviour that can happen in the margins. Sort of common normative behaviour isn't the only behaviour that should be tolerated.
Absolutely, and I think that's sort of where I now I tend not to get that nervous because or about things because I think, well, how bad can it be? Because I know how bad it can be. I've literally been locked away because of my behaviour. So I sort of feel really a sort of sense of freedom finally, and I know that that's why I want challenging work. That's why I kind of crave challenging work, because that's when I feel alive when I'm tested like that, and I know it's exciting to be tested. I don't want a sort of run of the mill life.
No. Well, you were
I love being.
You were Lear in your 20s. I mean, in the sense that you were that man stripped naked of external. You've done Lear when you were just a young man. So no wonder you were questing still. You burned through, my friend.
I burned through. Yeah. What am I going to do now? But I'm glad that America has given me the sort of, the sort of financial clout that where I can in my Latin, in this kind of Indian summer of my career, I can kind of go. I can kind of choose now. I can kind of, for at least a couple of years, I can kind of say yes and no to what I want to do, and that I've always wanted that, as opposed to being just having to pay the rent and take the fucking first thing that comes along.
But now, and I'm excited by this, now you have the book, and from the book, the drama series, which I shall watch with great. I really will. If you,
I'll cast you in it.
Oh, you don't want me, but I tell you what, I'll be. I would be a very ardent viewer of it, because your story isn't common or garden, and no one's is, and it's about accepting our strange, curious uniqueness, and I think you're perfectly pitched to just get it out there. I would love it.
Thank you.
And thank you for talking to me. It's been my pleasure. It's raised my value to have you spend an hour with me.
Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed it. And it's nice to get these. It's nice to get these more honest conversations, and not celebrity bullshit. This is been really, really, really. And I've watched your career for so long. Seen you how well you've done. So
I'm in my own Indian summer. That's your very polite way of saying it. We're both in our Indian summer.
But thank you very much for asking me to chat. It's been great. Really, really great.
You can watch David in Supergirl on Sky One in the UK. And as always, the music in this episode was provided by Waiting for Smith. You can listen to more of his music on Spotify.
Yes, it's true. When I'm down and I'm blue, all I do is stare at the view. I'll be heading east to find my peace.